Hey, Barbara.
All right. Good morning, everyone.
Good.
Good morning. Good morning. My name is Angela Brown. I'm the manager of the information section. I deal with information and everything else you need to know about what you're trying to do. I'm sitting in for Christina this morning. So this meeting is for the applicant. The applicant can ask questions on anything, any information that you received in your comments on Friday. This meeting is being recorded and live streamed. So our lead reviewer will pull up the plans. He will give you a little synopsis about what he thinks is entailed in the plan, and then it'll be your opportunity to ask any questions about any comments that you receive.
Just provide the intro and then Bill.
Okay, hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Philip Estes. I'm the lead reviewer for the site plan, and Ryan Sigworth here is also the lead reviewer for the preliminary plan. As you probably know, you guys are with the applicant team, right?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Perhaps we want to do some quick introductions. Sure.
Yeah, sure.
Sarah Brandt Harrell, Development Manager with Folger Pratt.
Kofi Moreau, Director of Development at Folger Pratt.
Sarah Alexander Tortigalis, Architect.
I'm Josh Sloan, I'm the planner with VICA. I'm here with Nancy Thompson, also VICA.
Good morning, Phil Hummel, Miles and Stockbridge Land Use Council.
Ryan Sigworth with County Planning.
Andrew Peretta, County Regulatory Supervisor.
Patrick Beller, County Division Chief.
Mary Jo Kishner with Up County Division Environmental Review.
Atul Sharma, the Director's Office, Development and Design.
Chris Van Alstyne, Up County Transportation.
Joe Server with the Up County Regulatory.
Brett Brown.
Good, thank you, everyone. As I mentioned, we've provided our detailed comments and e-plans. Some of the summary comments we would like to make sure that we do discuss today are urban design, architecture, comments related to the traffic circle lane, parcel H, the stormwater management area and opportunities there for recreation, trail connection and wayfinding, the recreation guidelines compliance, some additional tree planting, and the environmental FCP and a requested noise analysis. So those are major summary issues from planning that we would like to discuss today, and of course anything else you'd like to bring to our attention also. So I'll turn it over to your team.
Sure. So thank everyone for joining us, even those on the call. Realize we have a limited amount of time, so I am going to try to keep this as brief as possible. As always, I'm very excited to come here and talk about Park Potomac. I think it's been an evolution that the county has been a pretty good partner with us on, and we're looking to keep pushing through. We've got a couple more parcels to build out, as you guys know, and this is the next step in kind of finishing that out. What I wanted to do today, we did have a chance to review the comments in detail. Some obviously we'll get to today and some we won't have a chance to, and so we'll set some follow-up meetings for that. However, we've realized we send you guys a black and white set of plans and as though you are professionals, and we felt we wanted to share a little bit more context of what we were thinking, just so that we can kind of have a conversation, with this bright context in mind. So generally, the last time we were before you was pre-COVID times. We had worked very closely with Sandra to get the sketch plan approval back in 2019. We were updating a pretty old sketch plan, so there were a lot of uses that we had previously thought 15 years ago that we thought we'd build that just didn't come to pass. And so as we looked at the market, we changed those uses. We combined or looked at combining the parcels A and B to create a multifamily building. We had previously thought we were going to build a cinema. This parcel C over here, and I guess you can't see my mouse, sorry. The parcel C over here is an office building, and then we wanted to look for some optionality. And those of you that are familiar with Park Potomac, we currently have an open green in the middle. That is our what we call parcel F. That is intended to be either an office building or an apartment building. So still in that vein, we're looking to take that plan and begin to build out. We're ready to move forward with the multifamily building on parcels A and B. I think that, and Phil, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more to it, but as stated, there's a preliminary plan amendment that's been submitted. There's also a site plan that's been submitted. And so from the preliminary amendment side, we want to confirm that, we're consolidating the existing parcels, DD and EE, as you guys referenced them, we call them A and B. We're updating the data table to reflect all of the current zoning and all of the information that got approved at sketch plan. And we're demonstrating that the development program currently fits the approved APF that was grandfathered for this project. So that's, ultimately, I'd say the preliminary plan is mostly housekeeping, and the bread and butter of what we're here to talk about is what we've submitted for the site plan. I did want to give Sarah, a couple quick minutes of time to just walk you guys through understanding that this is a unique opportunity as we look to finish off Park Potomac. We want to make sure we get this right. So we've been working very closely with Torty to try and realize kind of the vision here and look forward to and being receptive to your comments to make this actually the best project it can be. So.
Sure. Thank you, Kofi. Is it okay if I stand up or would that be too hard?
That's fine.
There's a touchscreen there, right?
Oh, I won't touch
It
it.
is, yeah.
I will not touch it.
That's
Please
always,
don't try to-
someone touches the screen.
All right. So we were very excited when Poltercrat came to us for this site. Having gone to their office throughout the years, obviously this piece here is a very key component to the overall Park Potomac entry sequence and kind of knitting the whole southeast corner together. So we wanted to really make sure we had two key moments: the north here connecting to the heart of Park Potomac, but also being very cognizant of the southern arrival and how that feels. And that's tying into a lot of the comments you had in your report. So here, really, we're going to start off really at that northern point, and this is where the bend of Park Potomac occurs. So we wanted to really capture that angularity and how we massed our building. Two things. We wanted to kind of give that sense of a retail feature, even though we don't have a retail component. After analyzing the whole site and how that all works together, the thought was that really creating an active amenity corner that felt a little bit like a coffee shop with the co-working in that location could help animate this portion here. And then creating this opportunity that the main lobby, which is a little more central, or in the middle of the project, as far north as we could bring it, but ties into elevators that are a little bit more in the center of the block, could be here. And then you really see that main approach in the lobby area here as you're coming down. And that helps to really activate the corner and tie into the rest of the Park Potomac community. And then the next really important part is obviously the southern corner. Here, we wanted to make sure there is 25 feet change in grade for those that are familiar with the site. So really using that to our advantage, we wanted to create an active use on the ground plane and along Park Potomac Avenue, but not have the main lobby here since everyone really is tying more to the main part of the area. So we located the gym here. So this is a double-story, 20-foot high gym, all nice and glassy and light and glow at night. And then along Park Potomac Avenue, there is a series of entries into individual units. So it can have that little front stoop feel and really help animate Park Potomac. And then we also wanted to make sure, and this is really cool as we have a video that kind of swings through, but the way the light and angles of all this area come together, this is the kind of active rooftop terrace. And so animating that with both color and lighting really helps make that moment also glow at the top. So you kind of get this dual celebration there. Next. And then this is the first residential component on the highway. So we want to be very cognizant of how we shielded those units and how we celebrated the building in a 65-mile-an-hour experience. So we have some really cool artworks that we're proposing and also giving them these balconies that help give them a little more privacy when they're inside of their unit than if they were just windows up right on the wall. Next, please. And that was my 2-second design review.
So I think that one of the reasons we wanted to take the time to do that is because as we were reading through the comments, there were a lot of things that we kind of understood where they were coming from. And a lot of things were like, well, let's just explain kind of what we were trying to do. And then maybe, that helps kind of guide the conversations that we were having here. So from our look of the comments, I think you definitely mentioned a couple more things that doesn't necessarily weren't on the radar, which is fine, but absolutely a conversation about that southern corner, the circle, The comments about the roads, definitely something we want to talk about. It looks like there's absolutely a conversation about the northern corner as well, and diving a little bit more into kind of the challenges that we've got. There's definitely some easement conversations, and then what we have done and what we think, is kind of the best option to kind of highlight that lobby in that corner. There's also a conversation we want to have in the plan. We have to shift our public access road that we don't have a good name for right now, but it's this it's that road that kind of runs behind Private Drive. It's supposed to be shifted over a little bit more towards I-270. So we want to talk a little bit about that. We've already engaged folks over at SHA who are responsible for the highway expansion work, and that will oversee any coordination that we need to have with them, because in order to move that road, we are going to encumber a little bit of that off-ramp space. And so we wanted to talk a little bit about that and kind of if there are any expectations from a county level that we should be aware of. And I think that's kind of generally, some of the items we wanted to try to get to.
I think that's why it looks like you're installing a retaining wall along that
Correct.
section that isn't currently.
Correct. So we can pick a place to start? Or? Sure. All right. So you want to just start talking about the south very quickly? And I don't know.
I think actually I did courtyards first.
Oh, you did courtyards first.
I was just going in the order of the comments.
Okay, so this hopefully is a quick one. We had received a comment about, say that again?
Switch.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry, I stole the
Oh.
screen.
Oh, no, you're fine. I did not realize I had been stolen from, so that's probably my bad.
I thought the plan set would be more useful, but it's your meeting, so if you want.
We will probably flip back and forth, and I think technology allows us to do this.
That'll be fun. I have this.
Try to make use of it. So hopefully this is a quick conversation. This is just in reaction to a comment we received. Oh, sorry.
And this is much easier to read on my computer screen than it is on
About the courtyard, and Sarah, you can kind of talk.
Sure. So I think being cognizant of the courtyards is very important. We want to get light and sun into our units as well. I think part of it might have been just not having dimensions clearly shown. So we wanted to just articulate our narrowest dimension is 75 in this courtyard and 80 in this courtyard. And we find generally we want it never to be less wide than it is tall. You want it to be wider than it is tall. And we are only 55 feet tall. So if you even take our narrowest at 75 versus 55, and of course that's the narrowest dimension, the other one's 115 or 105. We feel like this is actually a very nice proportionate courtyard. It might read tighter than it actually sees when you see it in sections. So we just want to call that out.
So we can go through these, and I think as we typically do, we'll probably have some follow-up meetings to go through all that. This is helpful information. This whole corner is kind of tied into design issues. 2 or 3 design issues are tied together. One is, of course, continuing the kind of commercial experience around the streetscape, which we're trying to do with the workspaces, which we actually support. The other one is making sure that there is the prominence to the building entry, which I think is competing with the workspace. So kind of have to figure it out. And there's a vocabulary of these kind of jagged sawtooth balconies and facades in this that pull this building back away from the curb as it comes down to this corner. And the discussion of the courtyard is tied to that, because we felt that, there might be enough dimension there, but we didn't quite understand why the building had to pull back other than to, be on axis with some views to do that. And that was pinching that sort of entry point and entry into the courtyard and the relationship of the courtyard and the street. So this is a little bit of a spaghetti in the northern end. We'll have to, I think, work through it. The one comment I did want to make is in general, because it's a stick construction, the top of the building is pretty flat. Even though the grade is dropping 0.5 feet, the skyline of the building's all holding the same level. And there might be a couple of opportunities to play with that. So, for example, in this corner, there may be a place where you can bump up the parapet in a more substantial way to create a little bit of a jog in the skyline. Similarly, on the southern end, where you have that grand terrace, you like the idea of the terrace. I think that's a really nice idea. But perhaps there's a way to sculpt the top of the terrace in a way that maybe creates a little bit of articulation. Maybe the beams, if you will, that go back into the mass of the building don't go all the way up to the top of the building, come short a little bit. So I just wanted to put those thoughts out there as we are talking about sort of general ideas, but this is going to require some.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is more than we probably have time for here, so we
Yeah.
can dive in as much as you want. But I think, yes, one of the really quick responses is that we agree. I think in reading your comment and looking at this again, like keeping the entry up a little bit more to be someone to really kind of retailish versus entry. So it still needs to have that residential character, but making it a little more prominent is something we're going to look at.
Yeah, it sounds like you've been in our design meetings over the last couple of months. I mean, a lot of the things that you've raised are things that we've talked about. So I look forward to talking about them in more detail. And so we can definitely schedule a follow-up for that.
The one thing that
Oh,
we
sorry.
didn't talk about in your sort of summary of the comments is this suggestions to incorporate more active uses in the open spaces and the stormwater stuff. And we want to give you a little bit of context of where that's coming from. So Potomac is an awesome development, and it's really a complete community. And we are kind of getting to the tail end of finishing out that complete community. And for our purposes, it's really important in a complete development like this to have a range of spaces. I think there are already some wonderful spaces that create social interaction, for example, by the retail and the plaza. There's some really nice natural contemplative spaces in the forest conservation areas along the eastern edge.
On the 7 Lock side, yep.
Yeah. And we think what's lacking in the overall picture here is some really strong areas for encouraging people to be physically active. So that's where I think some of our comments around, trying to see what can be done on top or around the stormwater stuff, or creating other areas where people can do things like have, they don't have to be regulation size fields, but to have things like even pickleball courts or a futsal court or a multi-purpose space that can be used for exercising and being physically active is a missing component of the public realm here. And as we get into the tail end of development, we want to make sure that gets captured because there's not a lot of obvious areas to put it in. You have one development site that's not built yet, but over time, hopefully it'll get built and have some really nice buildings on it. So I just want to put that out there as well, that'll be probably another focus of our conversations that we'll.
Yeah, we are well aware of that. As you know, this conversation has been evolving at least as long as I've been at Folger Pratt's, almost 6 years. I'm not sure if you saw the submission that we had made in the package for what we are proposing on, because 3 years ago we had a lot of conversations about this, and some of the things, one of the challenges, unfortunately, how people interact with the communities have changed, and maybe we could have been a little bit more forward thinking, 10, 15 years ago, but a lot of it has already been built. And I think that's where you're coming from, which is, well, how can we kind of leverage what is here to either, adapt or use something to make it more functional. And so we did submit, it may not be to the extent of what you're talking about from a fitness standpoint, but we did submit a concept for a pedestrian path and some interesting, I'm going to use the term very loosely, art pieces that we wanted to put in one of the stormwater management ponds. I think that there were some concerns from the stormwater management side, so we would probably need to have those conversations and coordinating with them. I wasn't sure, we also were doing some having a conversation. I wasn't sure if there were any precedents in the county that we could point to. I know that there's, 1 or 2 in Alexandria or Arlington or something like that, but we're, within reason as always, but that is an area that we've submitted as part of this package that we plan to do something on that stormwater management pond in Montrose, where it served twofold in our opinion. It provides an additional experience that isn't currently there. It helps provide a reason for folks to walk down south of Park Potomac, and it provides a pedestrian connection to Montrose right at the crosswalk right there. And so, you know, I'm happy to continue to look at that concept and hopefully find ways to adapt what we're proposing there to something that
Yeah,
I guess makes sense.
I think from our perspective, and Patrick, feel free to jump in here. It's okay if some of this floods at times and can't be used, but I think we're looking for maybe slightly different set of uses than art and just something that you can look at. We want people to have reasons.
Something more interactive.
Yeah. In this development, and so we can work with you. I think Josh is aware of some projects where we're having similar conversations like Rock Spring.
Okay.
Places like that, where we're looking at putting facilities on top of even stormwater ponds. Here, I think we have a little bit more room to work with, so to speak.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and we understand for our friends from DPS who are likely on the line that we'll have some conversations and some requirements, et cetera, to work through. So, but similar to Rock Spring, yeah, we've got examples we can.
Okay, good. Yeah, because when we started,
a few years, even the last 3 years, I'd say the conversation has changed pretty
good.
drastically. So. I'm not saying super easy. Yeah, go ahead, go do that. We'll have to work through those things with DPS.
Sounds good. Yeah, it's good. Southern sign entrance stuff. I figured we'd just loop that in with the northern conversation and follow up that we'll have. I did want to raise the comments about some of the commentary about reducing the width of the roads. I think. Trying to remember the terminology that's used, back roads, primary roads, maybe looking at kind of the Montrose underpass coming into Park Potomac being the primary roads and maybe leaving those widths the same. And maybe this is the time to go to the plan. Do you want to pull up the site plan?
Yeah.
But ultimately, just what I took from those comments was that, look at this pathway as a main pathway, and maybe we leave these road widths.
We can't see. It's Rebecca. We can't see. We're still seeing the picture or design comments.
Yeah, so the road that goes between the two buildings is what he was pointing at, saying that that's the primary.
And the secondary roads being back roads, we should look at doing something to either remove the pork chops and narrow it so that they're more pedestrian friendly. Actually, that was the suggestion, was to remove the pork chops and narrow it so they're more pedestrian friendly. And so I think we're open to that. I mean, obviously we have to shift this road, so I think we're open to it. The dimensions might get a little tricky as we have those conversations.
This is Rebecca Torma from DOT. We'll need to review that. We do need to make the traffic circle or roundabout more pedestrian friendly. There's no crossings through the islands, but anything you do to the circle will need DOT's approval. And at this time, we are not, there is some concern about narrowing it. So, because I do believe that the primary access to the parking is actually through that service drive. Right,
correct.
And you're trying to keep people off of Park Potomac.
Correct.
So it's kind of, maybe, I don't know what else to do, but we can take a look at it. But you'll need to meet with our traffic people about it before we go forward.
And when I was on site, all of the pedestrian crossings, all the curb cuts and stuff are there. It's just the ramps haven't been put in, but all the groundwork has been laid for all the pedestrian crossings on the legs that aren't actually there.
And just to be clear, I think the comment is not to change the nature of the transportation aspect of that segment of the road. It should remain a two-way street, in and out, should have the minimum dimensions for the complete streets guidelines. I think what we are hoping to achieve is maybe the crossing distance gets narrower once you take that pork chop out. But it still continues to function as the same type of a street that it currently is envisioned to be, because the parking is there and we want to make sure people can circulate.
We still have we rely on the state standards for that, for the the dimensions and everything. So we'll have to evaluate it and see if it's possible.
That sounds good.
Since we're on roads, Rebecca or Billy, do you want to talk about the center line radius that you were discussing at our staff meeting?
Yeah, the one on the, obviously it's a private drive, but the center line, where you're tightening it, it seems to me too narrow. And the center line radius doesn't meet standards. 100 foot is a minimum.
Where?
I think she's talking about right here where I guess my cursor kind of pops up.
private street.
The private streets have to meet the county standards.
They do, and they did, and when you did it, it probably did meet the standard, and now you're reducing it. And the concern is that, you have those access points into the garage are very close to intersections. And the concern is somebody's going to come around and not see somebody around that curve, or you're in the circle and all of a sudden you got a loading, because I assume loading's on the top side of that, on the vertical part.
Yeah.
I think the loading is right.
And I assume they're backing in. Is that correct?
Yeah. No, I totally hear you, Rebecca. I think our comment in general is, and I get it, we got standards we have to meet. I think you're just looking at this circle, this intersection, it just, for the size of development and how it connects to the larger network, it feels like it could be tightened up, but I get
Yeah, I agree. It
just feels really large, like, compared to like.
And there might be something, and I don't know how big it is. There might be some way, but we don't really, we want to make sure that vehicles can actually get around and not drive over medians or curbs or anything. And but the access points are so close to that circle and they're so close to that radius that it is a concern that people aren't going to be able to see, vehicles coming.
Yeah, I think, we always want to do what we need to do to make sure that the pedestrian and the vehicular traffic is safe at Park Potomac. And Rebecca, as we look to set up a follow-up, there's additional conversations we'd like to have related to Park Potomac Avenue and our thoughts around kind of bringing that never-ending saga and conversation to a close. So I think there's probably some laterals between both of these conversations. But what I do want to also caution, obviously there's a commitment to move this road and we're going to go and do that. But I do want to caution kind of reworking things that have already been approved and installed and, within reason. I don't want this to turn into a conversation where we're redeveloping the entire circle. We'll very quickly be in a point where I'll probably be back 5 years from now talking about the same thing. So I just want to caution that, but obviously I think as always, we're going to be willing to work with you because we live here too. And there's definitely things that we've realized could be done better. And so we're open to doing those things.
So DOT is not going to, like, we looked at, your retaining wall. This is what I wanted to say. Your retaining wall, your steps, your stoops that are in the right of way that have a maintenance and liability agreement. Even for this building, we're not going to tell you to move them at this point. That's a business decision that we made today. We would not allow it, anything in the right of way. The other thing is the storm drain. We did look at that, and I think we were going to be okay with that as well. But certain things that we do, the existing Park Potomac Avenue has, we want to make sure that we at least understand what you're going to actually do instead of just continuing to let it sit and have parking that's designated for specific businesses, because the longer that sits there, the longer, people expect it. And then if the county takes over the road, I assume that the county would take over the road, then you're going to have a problem. People are going to ask, well, where's my parking? And we don't do that in the county. So.
Yeah, fully understood, which is why we, want to have a conversation to bring this to a close.
Okay. And we'll expect that before we go write our letter for preliminary plan.
For Park Potomac Ave?
Yes, we want to talk. We want to start having conversations now again.
Okay, sounds good.
One thing that I want to point out is that the existing private drive that goes to the parking garages. That was always intended as an interim condition. We are now more like, with our new layout, what was approved at the beginning. So that was already part of our preliminary plan, to have this larger block that was more square at that, square as we can get it with that turn radius. So we're going back to the approved outside of the interim condition.
I would like to see that approval because I find it, I would, well, I guess the Greg probably didn't comment on it, but the private drive should be built to public road standards. And I think we need to make sure it's safe regardless of whether it's approved or not. So we need to make sure that it's safe for vehicles.
Related to that, you'll see a comment in there on the preliminary plan side about a missing cross section, and that's mainly related to, I mean, cursor's so slow, the unbuilt part of this private road. They're just knowing, we're interested in making sure that there's a streetscape that's created there, and there's no cross section that sort of lays out how everything fits together. I think it'd be helpful if you're going to relocate the rest of the drive or portions of the drive and change the streetscape, push the cross sections up a bit to provide that information too.
Can you tell me who was speaking?
It's Ryan.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, with the mask, you can't see my lips moving. But so yeah, just providing that information on the revision for this section and any other changes you're going to make cross section.
Okay.
We should probably let you go through your list.
Yeah.
Yeah, there were one.
Yeah, we just under 15 minutes.
We talked about the road, so we were going to talk about the stormwater management and kind of what we're proposing there, but we can talk about that a little later. I'm not sure. Did you actually get a chance to see what we proposed, the pathway through it? Okay. So I don't need to show that. I think.
If you have a 3D of it, we'll probably pull it out.
Oh, yeah. That's what I was saying. You guys didn't get any like great pictures, so I don't know. I thought this would probably be helpful.
Submission category, cool pictures.
Yeah, we'll get that folder in next time.
The new folder.
Any cool pictures? So this is the existing condition of the stormwater management area that is right off of that Montrose entrance. And this is kind of what we were proposing, some additional plantings to kind of better shield the area. The kind of art pieces I was talking about of these little bird houses really to attract more kind of wildlife and provide that kind of experience. But I think equally so, there might be some, opportunities to put in, I don't know, some sort of equipment that might, or some opportunities for people to use this area for some fitness. But really, again, the three main focuses: drawing pedestrians down to this area, giving them a different experience that they don't already have at Park Potomac, and then providing a safe pedestrian walkway, connecting from Park Potomac to that Montrose road. So we can talk a little bit more about that.
And one thing about Rock Spring that was a little bit different than there, what we ended up doing is actually carving further volume out so that we could raise a large section of it above what we were getting credit for, and we were reducing our runoff to it. So in combination, it wasn't like that play area was going to get inundated, except maybe in like 100-year or 500-year flood.
Yeah.
We are still meeting our requirement below the level of the play area, which would be different from here. And I know a lot of other jurisdictions do it, so we'll have to get DPS in the room.
Yeah, so we can definitely figure that out. But that was our list. So I don't, lots more to talk about. I'm sure that we'll have lots of follow-up meetings, but again, we're excited. We're really motivated to work with you guys to kind of get there, and we'll be in touch.
Kofi, since we have time, sorry, go ahead.
Just on the FCP, before we submitted, we actually were going back and forth on how to redline it, how not to. I mean, our LOD is really restricted and it doesn't go anywhere near the conservation easements or
I
required
figured that.
areas.
I'm not really concerned. It's just a matter of it,
Just show that.
being quickly
Put it
able
on
to
the-
see it and have, mainly my thought is when our inspectors are looking at it.
Yeah.
They can easily read, okay, everything, they know what's happening.
Okay.
They're not in all these discussions, then they end up with the
Yeah.
final plan and they're trying to decipher.
Okay.
Phil, do we need to talk about wayfinding stuff at all? The public art, the tunnel, formalizing the trail?
Happy to give you an update on that.
Sure.
The public art under the Montrose Bridge, we are engaged with the public art process. We are going to the committee November 9th.
November meeting, it's not the 19th, but it's right around
We're
that.
going to the committee in November.
We've been coordinating with Rebecca, and giving her updates, checking in on the process, and trying to figure out when does she want to have information from us. So we spoke with her about 3 weeks ago, and she said,
Is this Megan? Flynn?
sorry, Megan, yes.
Megan Flynn,
Gotcha.
yes.
Sorry. Right. So Megan and I have been emailing quite a bit. So she let us know we're on for the November hearing. Documents are due to her October 26th. And she said if we were interested in kind of reaching out to her a few weeks before the 26th to give her an update, we can. But we let her know, we've identified a muralist. We've started working with her. We've also been in contact with, I think, SHA about lighting under the road.
We spoke with the MCDOT team. Rebecca helped set up the meeting. I think she sat in, but we just speaking to them about what's allowed, right? What can we attach, what can't we attach? And because obviously there's going to be some lighting components to this. So the update really is that I think we're very well in the process. We're engaged with all the right people, I think, as well. And so our hope is to get an approval of our public art prior to us going to planning board and hopefully in January.
Are you considering putting any of the public art components in the roundabout? Because that's what you see when you come in. There it is.
We have not, and only from the fact that we kind of just picked up from the approval in 2019. We didn't really go back to reimagine everything because thought we were pretty thoughtful in 2019. So we've not, we can have those conversations. We've already started diverting resources in the bridgeway, but not to say that there couldn't be some opportunities for the circle as well.
The circle is your first sort of ground level experience as you come into the community. And, instead of having some art pieces along the walk and stuff, we would much rather have it be front and center. And we've had developments do the full public art sort of review and do that.
Mm-hmm.
And there are times when developers just do garden buildings and in places and not get points for it, which means they don't have to go through the full review process of that.
Yeah.
So there's some options there to.
Understood. I heard wayfinding and I heard
Pedestrian connection to the
The trail
south.
connections.
the trail connections.
Yeah, I'll talk about the trail a little bit. The trail actually was better than Philip and I walked it last week. And it was better than I anticipated. Whoever you're contracting with maintenance was actually out there mowing it.
Yeah.
But when you walk through the tunnel, there's no way to know that there's even a trail there. The sidewalk just ends and then there's a hill and it curves around. And there's no signs. There's no way to even know. So I think it's a forest conservation easement through most of that. So some sort of formalized opening with a natural surface trail. I'm sorry.
Can we pull up the plan? I might be able to see the plan.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, I'm probably one of the very few people who are intimately knowledgeable about the trails and the forest conservation.
It's not great.
I don't know. Google Maps actually might be better because it's kind of off the.
Okay, hold on one second.
Yeah, while Ryan pulls this up, I also wanted to add that we had a citizen specifically contacting us about this trail connection.
Okay.
And they wrote a letter. It was before you submitted
Okay.
the application, but
They're looking for it. They wanted more signage.
yes.
All of the above.
Yes.
Okay.
They're basically saying they couldn't find it, it was not maintained, what's going on.
Oh, okay. Well, the,
How do I get to Cabin John Regional Park to the south, which I understand does not touch your property, but we need to have an answer because we know that's going to come up at the planning board for sure.
Got it.
How do we provide connectivity to the regional trails? So we want to be prepared to answer that. We want to have a good answer, sharp and crisp, and we might even have citizens also looking for that as well.
We can help kind of work on a response for you. I would need to better understand where exactly the trail is, but
That's fine.
yeah, what mine,
Pulling up.
I know where our trails are.
Right.
But the ones that you're talking about connecting to, I would need to better understand that. We have a disjointed trail in the sense that, so my immediate response to signage is I need to go check to see why there is no signage.
Oh,
There are three entrances to our trail. One of them, and it's the last part of the trail, is down at the Montrose Bridge that we're talking about that you're saying you didn't see any signage. There's another, and the other two entrances are off of Seven Locks almost. And so, and again, they're all disjointed. There's like one part that goes from almost the kind of Seven Locks Plaza commercial area that goes to Cadbury, and you kind of have to cross the road, and then the trail picks up again in the woods, and it goes from Seven Locks to almost Montrose, and then there's no real connection between the Montrose part and the bridge area that we're talking about right now, which is just its own thing. So signage wise, I know we have signs on the other entrances. I just have to go figure out where our sign is down there. And if we can just redo the sign to match, we'll put the sign down there. And maybe there's some additional signage in other places to kind of better point people there. Our landscaping team, whoever we're using now, but it's always in the contract. I think they're out there 2 times a year, if not 3, but I think it's 2 times a year that they go out there. They cut brush from around the trees. If there's dead trees, they replace them. And for the trail portions that are off of Seven Locks, they should be maintaining, and I'll walk it. It's been about a year probably since I've been back there, but they should be, in some cases, moving trees if they're encumbering the trail. They go back there and chip up trees sometimes to, redo the path. So we should be doing that at least once or twice a year. So I can go and double check those, but those are some of the responses I would give you. But as far as why we're not connecting to another trail, I'd have to better understand where that other trail is.
okay,
All right, we're
So
just about
okay.
done, so
Quickly,
a couple more
come-
minutes.
You come through the tunnel
Mhm.
and the trail access point is right here. The
That's our trail, yeah.
sidewalk stops and then there's a little hill and there's a green space and the trail comes through here and you can actually see the
bridge.
right
Yeah.
there. And then it curves and it kind of comes, it meanders. It's hard to tell whose property it's on, and then it pops out right here.
It's always been my understanding that we don't touch anything past the entry of the
It
footbridge.
does not look like I was saying, it's actually well maintained through here.
That's
to the
us.
Bridge.
Yes.
I'm not sure who maintains the bridge. It is you, absolutely.
Yeah.
The rest of this is very single track sort of hiking trail style.
Yeah. And
But see, having some sort of natural surface trail through up to this point, to try to formalize it a bit more.
we can do exactly what we're doing up on Seven Locks, is take the wood chips and put them down and put the signs up. Yeah.
Because, you're maintaining it and that's great, but I could not see any way, unless someone saw it in a brochure or somewhere, that anyone would ever know that was there.
Got it.
Even standing at the end of the sidewalk, you don't even, even standing right here, you don't even know what's there.
Plus, there's just enough grade, like there's just.
Yeah,
a
there's
little bit
just
of it
enough
you
grade,
see
you
it.
You
can't.
don't see what's right over, yeah.
Kinda
Okay,
looks like a
understood.
patch.
Before we break, can we talk about resubmission schedule?
Yeah.
What is the resubmission schedule?
Okay, you have 1 minute. Go ahead.
Just-
Angela.
That's right, you have 1 minute.
The resubmission schedule to stay on the 120-day clock, if you want to do that, is roughly 10 days, I think, from now.
I think it's 15 from the first, if I remember right.
Are you asking us for the dates? Is
Yes.
that what you're asking us?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
We can pull that up. I thought you wanted to make a pitch about what, what your goals were.
We submit 2 months. Can we get to the planning board in December?
Yes, for an extension.
While you're looking for that, I thought I saw on one of the approved landscape sheets was an actual trail connector plan,
It's October.
the previous approval. I think I noted in my comments, so I
Yeah, it
tried
was
to
actually-
reference.
I'm gonna email you because I had a couple questions about
Okay.
your comments. I'd have to go back and look at the package. I'm not familiar.
I think I referenced, it's shown on the
Oh,
FCC.
it says what sheet? Okay,
Yeah,
okay, I'll
pretty
go back
sure.
and look at
If
that.
not,
Okay.
November
email me
1st,
in.
Okay.
which is 65.
And I think
days
it kind of looked to me, I was trying to look at the broader picture, like maybe
Currently,
trail
we
starts
are
off, it
January
connects
5th.
like even
Planning
like
board.
neighborhood streets, and then ultimately from those sidewalks or wherever you could connect to like a park trail. Ultimately, I think that idea is that it's gonna get down to Kevin John.
I don't know why I'm not familiar with that. So I'll go back and look at our package and.
And I'm not sure
see.
if our,
November 21st is when we
Get
meet
that
our agency.
Okay.
because that is a thing
That's 45 days prior to
to ask about too.
planning board.
Okay.
Connectivity through all of
Just
it.
want to be prepared to, and
That's
understand, all of us understand what the
That thing's always.
goal is, whether it's in place now or.
Because the holidays.
It's a future plan, yeah, and that'll be helpful for.
I know it's on us.
Not only for us, but for you too.
Understand.
And I know it's on us to get those agency letters.
Yes. Okay, anything else? Anyone?
Just very quick comment on the transportation study or statement rather. I know you submitted some traffic counts and all that. The issue is it's not done under the LATR 2022 LATR, so if you could adjust that for that methodology. The big difference is it needs to be under person trips. Right now it just states trips. So they need to be adjusted under 2022 LATR to person trips. That's the.
Was that in your comment?
I don't know if that was in their comments, but that is a comment. It has to be done. It's just.
Okay, I'll talk.
It's not a big deal.
No, I'll talk to Wes. I'm sure he knows.
Yeah, so just 2022 LATR just has to be done.
Okay. And someone said something about a noise study earlier. We have done a noise analysis and we can submit that.
Yeah, you submitted it. It's in there. I didn't see it at first, but I saw it in there, and it just says that there will be mitigation needed for the interior space.
And we've done the follow-up analysis, so
Okay.
we can.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Christina Sorrento. I'm the chief of the Intake and Regulatory Coordination Division. And this is the DRC meeting for BF Gilbert subdivision of Tacoma Park. Your lead reviewer is Saquon. And basically this meeting is for the applicant to ask any questions you might have based upon the comments that you received. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded. Saquon, if you want to just highlight any of the major issues, and then we'll turn over to the applicant.
Okay, sure. Good morning. I will start with the note that this application falls within the city of Tacoma Park, which retains their own stormwater and tree protection authority. So as plans develop, be sure to comply with those regulations as you submit plans to us in the planning department to avoid any needed revisions or amendments down the line, just so those plans coincide between county and the city. In general comments and subdivision review comments, we noticed that the SOJ contained references to the previous proposal for 3 lots rather than 2, and there were general plan inconsistencies that you want to resolve as you move forward to the next submittal, but also provide justification for the flag lot arrangements and reference the findings required in Chapter 50 subdivision regulations. And that also relates to our major comments on the plans, which show measurements from building face to building face, showing the 80-foot separation rather than between building restriction lines. So just keep that in mind as you revise your site layout to make sure that those requirements are met and shown on the plans as well as in the SOJ. I also noted that our environmental reviewer noted that a new tree safe plan and exemption will be needed to update to the current proposal of 2 lots. And just to overall generally update field conditions as the previous exemption and tree safe plan are a bit older. So once we get those field conditions updated, you can then assess how to better preserve environmentally sensitive areas on the site, including sensitive soils and trees and potential forest areas. Some major comments from fire and rescue as well. It was noted that the driveway should be fire department accessible, or all BRLs should measure at least 15 feet. So please coordinate with Marie LeBaugh for to better assess how to meet those requirements as it relates to fire access, as well as balancing the needs for the subdivision distance requirements in BRLs. And that also relates to our transportation comments. We wanted to explore the possibility of consolidating 2 driveways and curb cuts on the site. We'd like them to be as narrow as possible, ideally no more than 10 feet wide, but just make sure you coordinate with Marie as well to find a good balance there. And the site does not qualify for the de minimis pavement for frontage improvements and would be required to construct the 6-foot sidewalks with a 6-foot buffer unless waived by the city of Tacoma Park. So keep that in mind. Also, we wanted to make sure that you include a cross section of Oswego Avenue with showing the potential dedication on site unless the city waives that as well. And I think that wraps up our major comments. There are more specific items in the change marks, but I'm welcome to take your questions now.
This is Mike Razavi at Rastec Associates. Good morning to everybody. Thank you for having this meeting with us so we can resolve or ask some questions. We really appreciate it. My major comment is about the 80-foot separation per the subdivision requirements or regulations. The way I kind of read that is that, and Saquon, I got the various regulations you sent me about this issue. The way I read that is that being in a unique situation where we could potentially restrict the setback requirements to be within the building envelope as shown right now. So the 80-foot, so in other words, the setbacks would be further increased or reduced to be just the building envelope, therefore meeting the 80-foot requirement for the separation to the other structures involved. And also the structure in the rear is not really a house, single family house. It's more of a apartment building type development.
Yes, it is an apartment building development, but there is still a requirement to maintain the 80 feet there. If you look in the zoning requirements, there's a minimum setback which can be applied on their property. I believe it's 30 feet, so you'd need to apply at least 50 feet within your property to have that final 80 feet in the rear there.
And then in the front, I think if we just we'll look at maybe potentially providing the property line further up towards the existing house, but our intention was to sort of have the building envelope of the proposed building as being the restriction line, therefore providing the 80 feet that way, and then just sort of move the property line between the two lots, the existing lot and the existing house and the new one, further up so that we can achieve further clearance to the restrictive BRL line.
So let me make sure I understand you correctly. You're saying that you want to have the building envelope basically be the face of the building there rather than any offset?
Yes.
So the building envelope is the BRL?
So the building envelope is the BRO, is the building itself?
Yes. We've done that in the past too, and I feel it's an acceptable option to be able to make this requirement work, because I think I read somewhere in one of the texts you sent that the planning board can require additional setback. So this additional setback would allow this 80-foot rule to work, where the building envelope becomes also the setback lines, as opposed to the traditional setbacks of, 30 feet, 20 feet, whatever you have.
I think, Mike, you'd want to show the BRLs. If you're going to do it that way, you have to show them on the plans. I mean, that's putting a very tight envelope for the proposed house. I mean, and also knowing that you can't put any, accessory structures that would require a permit from DPS, within those BRLs.
Sure.
And the BRLs are going to have to be shown on the plat.
No, I realize that. See,
Okay.
the way what we've done in the past is, for example, on something completely different but residential, the planning board then came and said that you need additional BRL beyond the regular. So even though the plan was presented the normal way, later on we revised the BRL lines to comply with the planning board requirements before the plan was signed. But I think in this case, we just can go back and say, okay, this is going to be our BRL line within the building envelope, and therefore that way try to meet the 80-foot setback requirement.
Yeah, I think you're just going to have to show very clearly that where the BRLs are, so that meets the 80 feet.
Okay.
And we'll take a look.
In addition, make sure in your justification you make that case to meet the findings of the black lot requirements in the subdivision regulations as well, so we can have that paired with the plans.
Okay, will do. That's the only major question I had. If the applicant has any questions, he can ask too.
No, I think it was basically a little clarification on the Chapter 50, Section 4.3 excerpt that was sent. It mostly just mentions the 80-foot separation between building envelopes, not BRLs. Like it said 5 times. So I just wanted to clarify. I mean, I'm going to let the professionals handle it. I'm not a professional in this, but just basically reading this, it says the appropriate separation between building envelopes can be achieved, and it should be 80 feet. It doesn't mention 80 feet between BRLs. Just a note. I mean, I'm going to let you guys handle whatever you need to do with BRLs, but just a clarification there. It just says separation should be between building envelopes. Doesn't say BRLs.
Building envelopes and BRLs can conceivably be the same thing.
Gotcha. Which is why I said I'm not a professional here.
Okay, so we'll work within what we've just discussed and try to provide. Saquon, is it okay if I kind of like send you an email of some options, and then before we make another formal resubmission, we can kind of get on board with each other and move forward?
Yes, that'd be great. I appreciate
All right.
that.
I really appreciate that. Thank you for that opportunity.
Okay, anything else?
No, I think that's it from our end.
That's it from our end. Thank you so much. Thanks for
All
taking
right,
the
thank you, everybody.
All right,
Thank
have
you.
a-
We appreciate it.
Do we want to do time frame for them?
Right, so I'll just lay out the schedule as it exists now. Based on the acceptance date of September 7th, your next resubmittal is due on October 12th, and your final resubmittal will be due on November 11th, with agency letters due on November 21st. And this is where it gets a bit tricky. Staff report is to be posted based on these dates on December 26th, with a planning board date on January 5th. But given the holidays and potential breaks there, we may need to push that back 1 to 2 weeks. So I'll be in communication with your team to get the extension in place if needed to have a finalized date for and staff report posting.
I'm sorry, Tegan, would you just repeat those numbers, dates one more time? I'm just writing.
Sure, I may have made a mistake there. So your first resubmittal is October 12th, and your final resubmittal will be November 1st.
Okay. And then you mentioned something about January 5th.
Yes, so we have a planning board date based on the acceptance date of September 7th. Your planning board date would be January 5th. However, given the holidays and board recesses, we may need to push that back 1 to 2 weeks. So we'll be in communication as that develops to get you a finalized planning board date.
Perfect. Got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, everybody.
All right. Thank you. Have a good day.
I'm Christina Sorrento. I'm the Chief of the Intake and Regulatory Coordination Division, and this is the DRC meeting for Centerway Muse. This meeting is being recorded and live streamed. Your lead reviewer for this is Troy, and I'm just going to ask Troy to kind of highlight some of the major issues for this, and then really this is the applicant's meeting, so you could take it over and ask any questions that you have. Troy?
I think like everybody's probably in regards to just the issue with the site, it's a small site. I think for us, the biggest constraint is trying to find options that is feasible due to like the lack of information for the environmental issues. It's typically, you can kind of maybe work around it, but with such a small site and such a large environmental impact, it's just even hard for us to kind of work with even proposed designs off of what you're showing at this point. I think one of the positive things are we are in support of a zoning change, even if it's not, I guess, or at least the thought of residential coming into this property since it is light industrial. So in that regards, like, I believe we will be in support depending on the layouts and understanding that environmental constraint of that zoning process or that change. Of course, that comes with, I think I laid it out in my comments. You would have to come in for a LMA, which would require a forest conservation plan, which would have an NRI tied to it. So we would know within that process what potential designs could work within this area. I think in regards to the TF zone, floating zone that you had showed, I put in my comments that a 15% open space, but that would be common open space would be required. And that's due to the 2-acre lot versus the other percentages that, if you were doing it individually, those lots would be a 10% requirement. So I just wanted to provide clarity within that open space within my comments. And then I think one of the other constraints that we highlighted was a potential dedication that would be required along the frontage of Snuffer School Road due to the current sidewalk being at curb, and we would want to see a buffer. So those are the things overall that I saw that would definitely dictate how the lots will line up. But it, like I said, it was just hard for staff just to even kind of work with what you're showing without even understanding the proposed environmental impacts and knowing that there's existing plans that may not be valid, but they also showed a pretty significant barriers in that regard. So without looking at the prior and not necessarily agreeing or having enough information to look at the proposed, it was just premature for staff to kind of dictate a layout or unit yield, even with the proposed zoning request. But we're happy to address any questions from you at this point, or even the comments that was provided, or even next steps.
Daniel, are you going to jump? Good morning. This is Jane Krascocki with Soltis, and we appreciate all of your comments and have taken a look at those and had a couple of questions of our own and thought we might want to clarify some of the issues that were raised during the comments. I wonder, could I share the screen?
Yep.
Okay. Oh, all right. Can you see that?
Yes.
All right. So here's our site right here. Zoomed in a little bit further. We're adjacent to the park and apartments on the left, on the lower end of the screen here, and the Green Farm Conservation Park here. So right at the intersection of Centerway Road. So as you all know, there's been a number of approvals on the property, including preliminary plans to subdivide it into 2 lots and special exceptions to allow the auto-related uses, and then concurrent site plans that were filed and approved later, allowing for those uses. Unfortunately, the approved plans were never built. And so the applicant is now looking to address the housing need in the county and develop with housing, and thus use the rezone to the proposed TF zone. So we did submit an existing conditions plan. We've added a little bit of information to it. I can show you that one at the end, but and our proposed conditions here. One of the things was one of the questions was regarding the floodplain, and there is no FEMA or park and planning floodplain on the property. However, there is one close, but there wasn't also an on-site floodplain established at the time of the preliminary plan. And then later floodplain study was done that confirmed a floodplain and was used in the following site plans that were approved. So we were wondering, when you asked the question, which floodplain were you looking for? We apologize for the neglect, and we would show all three of those. But one thing that should be noted is with the stream valley buffer, also there was requests to show the stream valley buffer. There was a 100-foot stream valley buffer on the property, or that's the typical one that you would show with this class of a stream. But at the time of preliminary plan, the stream restoration that was done and the relocation of the stream, making it more of a serpentine and configuration and allowing for better absorption of the water. That was agreed that the environmental benefits of that were far better than any kind of offset that would be 100 feet away. So in this case, and the stream valley buffer, instead of being the 100 feet, was decreased, and it was allowed that would be decreased in lieu of those improvements. And that's what was carried through in all of the plans. This is the floodplain study that was later done and carried that was reflected in all of the site plans and also the approved FCP that is right here. So this is the forest conservation plan that was done at the time and used for both properties, and this was approved. And so we would ask that that same forest conservation plan that's been approved, and the forest conservation easements have already been established as well. The forest has been planted, and as we'll discuss later, many of the road improvements have been done as well. Well, all of them. So we would ask that if we could respect that same FCP and those constraints going forward with this plan. Here's the property. So the forest has been planted. This is the ephemeral stream. It only flows in reaction to watery rain events and any from the McKeever Regional Stormwater Pond. So just to bring you up on that. So here's our proposed plan. What we like to show is now one of the other questions that we had was in regard to a request for a 100-foot buffer from the park property. Oops, I'm sorry. Oh, I just lost it. Hold on. I'm going too fast for my own good. Okay. So we looked at the impact of that would have, and I don't know where it comes from in the ordinance. So I would, we had a question about that and where we would find that. But if that were required, you can see this yellow line here, and I will enlarge it a little. That would have a severe impact on the developability of the site. So we would like to clear that up with you as to whether or not that's really a requirement. I can only guess where that requirement comes from. So,
Just to get clarification, you're saying the Stream Valley buffer, the 100-foot Stream Valley buffer line is what you wanted clarification on?
well, we'd like to use the same Stream Valley buffer as before in that be able to not do the Stream Valley buffer at 100 feet and use this floodplain line instead in the 25-foot floodplain buffer as opposed to the 100-foot Stream Valley buffer. But that's a different issue than this one. There was also another comment about we need to set back 100 feet from the park boundary.
And I think the comment, to clarify, came from Parks, so maybe, I don't know if they're on to.
Yeah, hi, this is Henry Goebel with Parks, and so it's not, that's more of a request that we have from our foresters that's about being concerned about potential hazardous trees and trying to make sure that we're not going to have problems. It's not something that's hard and fast. We could probably, particularly in this case, and we'd have to get into it a little bit more, but I think it's something we could probably work with you guys on to just check what the tree condition is like and where we'd have concerns and not. So
sure.
It's just about sort of being cognizant of the fact that you might be near parkland and the impacts that could have on things.
That's good. We'd like to work with you on that. I don't think there's many trees along the Conservation Park Drive on that side, and there is forest above to the north, but we would like to work with you on that.
Right. Yeah, I don't think it would be a problem for us to figure that out.
Okay.
I wondered if, my name is Stephen Paul, and I'm with the owner of the properties, the two properties. I wanted to give a little better clarification for the development committee on the history of the Stream Valley. So this property was under contract with Amoco Oil and then eventually BP. It happened twice. And after the second time, particularly lot 42, BP, in advance of building the service station, constructed all of the Stream Valley buffer requirements and stream improvements and re-landscaped, but they also installed the 4 pipes to the edge of Snapper School Road, which ultimately got connected to an improvement done by Montgomery County for Snapper School Road. But I just want to understand that those improvements have been there since about 2000, 2001. And then unfortunately, Amoco or BP changed their mind. And even after spending all that money on doing the stream improvements, they chose to not move forward. And meanwhile, everything has grown up since then. But I just wanted to make sure that was clear that, all this work was done in advance of the development that was about to take place, but didn't. Thank you.
And this is Bill Commoners. As a follow-up of what Stephen was saying, we have utilized all of those improvements and the requirements that were imposed in that earlier plan as background conditions for this development. We've tried to respect and honor and maintain all of those improvements for this as part of the existing conditions for this plan and work within those constraints. Daniel and Jane can explain a little bit more about that, but that's been sort of the guiding principle, is given that all those improvements were made 20 years ago and have had the 20 years of growth and maturity, we wanted to try to work within that and wanted to make sure that that was consistent with how you all would treat it so that we knew what we had to work with.
And speaking of those road improvements, this is from the MCDOT site, and this is our site right here at the end of at this juncture of Centerway and Snapper School Road. And this was a CIP project and was just completed in April of 2021. So I know that some of our bikeway master plans and requests were for a green panel in between the sidewalk and the road. However, I just wanted to point out that these were just constructed like a year ago, and this is are the plans that MCDOT completed for that project. Their cross section for the road is shown here, and this is what exists out there today. So we do have an 8-foot shared use path as well as a 5.5. So we are accommodating it, but not in the fashion that maybe would be more the standard today of having of having a green panel in between and having a shared use path. This one has both. So, and I can show you, this is the bikeway master plan, and they, oops. They do call for a shared use path here along the north side. Here's Snopper School Road. However, we were just concerned and wondered if you were as well about those improvements having just been torn up, and when maybe we could address those conditions, provide that.
And Jane, I think the other constraint of that frontage that maybe you can point out is the existing PUE that's along the frontage that constrains.
Right, so that's what I was just point out with this line, is that we have PUEs along here, existing PIE and a PUE. There are significant, there's an overhead electric through here and a number of electric poles throughout the two properties. And that would be a considerable effort to move all of that, as well as this head wall here, which takes all of these, the drainage from the head wall that drains from Kiever. Oops, I'm going to get myself in trouble here. I knew that. Sorry.
Jane, this is Matt Folden. I appreciate what you're saying here and the recent construction of the improvements and everything. I think oftentimes what we see with DOT CIP projects is there's a several years lag between when master plans come out and when they're actually constructed. And so even though those are new improvements, if you came in with a new application for a site plan for this site or rezoning or anything, we would be making the recommendations to be consistent with the 2018 bicycle master plan.
Well, and I appreciate that too, but then at each end, you won't be tying in with what's already been built the entire way down center Snopper School Road. This will be one segment out of these improvements have been made all the way down Snopper School Road to the east and to the west. So
understood.
I would just ask that
Yep.
could be taken into consideration.
Yep, understand that. And if we did make any changes along the frontage here per the master plan recommendations, we would have to work out the transition.
Mm-hmm.
So thanks for the comment.
Okay. And then I guess the last thing that we really wanted to, we were concerned with in the comments, and maybe I need to do, was the request for 2 access points. These are 2 existing separate lots. They will be developed and potentially could have 2 separate owners in the end. And we just wanted to make sure there are 2 existing entrances already built in as the DOT envisioned this having two different developers. So we would just request that there be 2 entrances, and in particular because we have a stream valley buffer there and floodplain that goes right through the middle of the property. So even if we were to say, okay, we're fine with 1 entrance, then we'd have to cross a floodplain. So, and a forest conservation area, which is all up in here. So maybe I'll go back to our original plan and we can.
Yeah, Jane, to answer your question,
Take
this is
that questions for you all, yeah.
Yeah, this is Natasha, the urban designer of Mid County. So one of my comments was regarding those access points that I think is in line with our transportation planner. So we do understand that this is very like a constrained site due to the environmental like a buffer that you have between the two lots. So it's understandable that you need two access points, but we want you to explore other ways of accessing to the site, because the way that you are laying it down, like those access points are creating a very unsafe environment for pedestrian and cars, especially with the wide radii that you're proposing. So we kind of like challenge ourselves and did a couple of layout studies on top of like what you guys are proposing to create a better like an urban design for the environment. Like the way that you have it on lot 40, I cannot read it from here, but the one on the right side, I think it's 43. The houses are not fronting the street, are kind of like tilted. So we kind of would like to see if there is a way that the housing create a frontage along the main road. And also the lots that are facing at the back, they don't have like a direct access to the sidewalk. So if somebody is taking a bus or using public transportation, like from the public sidewalk, they have to come through the alley to get to those back lots. So I'm more than happy to kind of like share the two alternatives that we laid out to create a better frontage for the houses and take advantage of the environments that you have instead of backing the houses to it, like front the houses to it and create like a frontage. But then we also created like access point from the park driveway, which like we have to consult with the Parks Department to see if that's doable or not. And also we would like you to explore the options of having access from the driveway from the apartments on the east side. That might also help you create a better layout for your townhomes. So those are some of the comments that you can see on the area design that I put on. So I'm more than happy to share those layout later on if you think that that would be helpful. But let me know either way.
Any input on design, I think would be really appreciated. I'd love to see those. I think our whole team would like to see that. If you have some other ideas of how to handle this.
Natasha?
Yeah, sure. So I'm gonna share it with you through Troy, our lead reviewer.
That'd be great, Natasha. One of the things that I think you should keep in mind is, as you were saying, or as Jane was describing, we didn't really want to try to cross the stream or those pipes. And I think there's another comment in amongst the comments from staff about trying to use that area where the pipes are as some open space for the development. So obviously we didn't want to put a connection in through that as well. And there was also a comment, I think, from the Parks Department saying they didn't want us to connect to their road. So that's another reason why we were trying to maintain the existing entrance locations generally for that, given that they're already there in relation to where the adjoining access points are.
Yeah, so I do have alternative that is not like relying on the parks driveway. So I'm more than happy to share that as well. But the comments related to the open space, like I know that you cannot put any structure on top of the pipes, but we thought that frontage along the road would be a great opportunity to provide some sort of like a usable open space for the 20-some units that you're providing here.
Right. And that's another reason why we didn't want to use it for a roadway connector between the two.
Yeah, correct. Understood.
Okay, we need to wrap this up. So if you have any last questions or comments.
We'll arrange some individual meetings on things. Natasha, if you would share those schemes that you have, that would be great.
Sure.
The biggest thing is just to is the major issue for us after the floodplain being off the site is to make sure that we can continue to use the improvements as they were designed and implemented before, so that we know what areas we're working with. That's the biggest constraint that we we need to resolve here. And this is a concept plan level, so obviously we understand the concerns about the level of detail, but obviously this was at the concept plan level of details as opposed to a more refined design for that.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
This is the DRC meeting for White Oak Storage. I am Christina Sorrento. I'm the chief of the Intake and Regulatory Coordination Division, and your lead reviewer is Parker Smith. Basically, this is the applicant's meeting to ask any questions you might have. This meeting is being recorded and live streamed. So Parker, go ahead and take it away.
Hi, thanks, Christina. So you should have received our comments on Friday in just an email from me to Dylan Macro. We have two, I think, primary comments to discuss and maybe meet about further later on down the road. First being, we'd like some improvements to this area at the front of the building to make it as attractive from sort of an urban design and landscape perspective as humanly possible. And the second is the area at the rear of the property, which is in the path of a master plan connection between the FDA to the south and Lockwood Drive to the north. So at the very least, we want to make sure that this new expansion isn't prohibiting that from being realized in the future. So those are the primary comments that I think we had. So I'll turn it over to the applicant for any questions.
Great. Thank you. Liz Rogers with Lurch Early, and we have our team on the call too, who can chime in or answer questions. But I think, Parker, you've kind of identified the two that we wanted to cover in today's meeting with everyone on the call. I do think we'll probably just need to set up follow-up meetings to really get into the weeds on them. But I thought it might be helpful to provide a little bit of background, at least kind of start that discussion today. I know we've had some meetings with the smaller area team staff where we provided some of this background to some of you, but not all. So if that's okay, I will just kind of dive in and take the first one in terms of the improvement at the front. And then I'm going to share my screen. So I put together a few. Looks like you had them too. So as you know, this is obviously an existing self-storage facility. So there are some constraints that truthfully we're working with, and we look forward to kind of continuing the discussion about how we can improve this design within those constraints. This just really kind of obviously shows the picture of the existing conditions. The main reason this is important, it's obviously this existing building, while we're significantly improving its architectural presence on the street by reskinning it, the internal operations aren't changing. And so that's really one of the key drivers where we have to have loading and parking in the front. The elevator access to get up to the upper floors in that front building is right here. There's also the storage office here as well. And the building is overall, there's a second access point at the rear. It's well over a football field long. I think it's like 400 feet long. So we have to have the two access points for the customers that have their units up towards the front. So that's one of the constraints that we're working with. The other is there's this kind of map shows just like all the various kind of utility constraints that exist within that front parking lot today. We have tried to evolve the design from an earlier meeting that we had with some of the members of planning staff. We had originally proposed kind of a improved little parklet up here in our original meeting. Heard kind of from the director's office that wasn't desirable or wasn't where we should really be investing kind of our resources with this, and that perhaps expanded environmental features like the solar panels on the new building would be more desirable in this community, just given both the use and kind of how much space we had up here. We did remove the parking that you could see from the existing condition photo is over on this side today to try to minimize the parking that's in the front of the building. And we also constructed this kind of covered pergola canopy over the loading to try to like visually bring the building as close as we can to the street and try to kind of conceal those loading spaces, knowing that we have to maintain them for the operation of the building. And that's kind of what you see here in terms of this was added following our last meeting with staff before we submitted the application to kind of try to address some of those comments. So Rebecca, is there anything else I missed that you'd want to add?
No, I think that you touched on a lot of the important things regarding the existing building and the function. and that, the loading location is up near the front of the building, and the challenges that we have are some of the internal locations of things, and then also the drive aisle along the side. This is a very small, narrow site, and so the building itself is very narrow, and that there's not a lot of other places to relocate loading along the side of the building that would be appropriate.
Yeah, that's a good one as well. So I'll kind of pause there. I don't know if you have, I think, this is something that we'll continue to work with you all. And I don't know, Natasha or Parker, if anyone has any other comments on this point now, or if we should save them for a follow-up meeting, but certainly love to hear kind of within those constraints, suggestions that you have that we could improve this further. But we have tried to kind of advance it to address some of those comments we've been hearing.
Yeah, this is Natasha, if I can jump in. So first of all, we wanted to ask for removal of those loading and a parking up front due to the zoning that you're trying to change to CR. So that's prohibiting any parking space between the building and a curb. But since we didn't have the rest of your building's floor layout, we didn't know what's happening at the back. So that's why one of the suggestion was removing the loading to the back of the building. But I don't know how the back will look like. It looks like the aerial, it looks like there are some parking at the back, but internally, I don't know where the location of the elevator, are they another set of elevator at the back or not? So if you can also provide us the rest of the building footprint toward the back, that will be really helpful. But beside that, creating some sort of a public open space in the front to create that frontage along New Hampshire, that would be very appropriate. One of my suggestions was to narrowing down the driveway. Just by measuring it, it looks like it's 35 foot kind of wide, which is really wide even for the truck. And this is a really low traffic, as your traffic study shows, it's really low volume traffic coming in and out. So as much as we can reduce the entryway into the property and narrowing it down and create a better streetscape for the pedestrians, having the raised sidewalk along that driveway, all of those will help with the frontage improvement.
And one thing, sorry, Liz, real quickly, this is Matt. One thing that I wanted to chime in with, and you touched on the earlier meetings that we had about the open space in the front. And I just want to draw the distinction that what Natasha's saying is not inconsistent with what you heard from Gwen. It's really more about creating a better pedestrian environment in the front, but not necessarily putting the level of investment that you had initially showed to us. So I just wanted to clarify that point.
Sure, that's helpful, actually, clarity in terms of, I maybe misunderstood the comment, in terms of kind of improvements through the landscaping is what we were talking about, not necessarily a formal parklet or something that we were showing before.
Yes.
Okay. That's helpful. Thank you. And Natasha, you're right. And we do have, I'll make sure that they're uploaded. I believe they were, though, full kind of sections. I don't have it in this PowerPoint, but that would show there is a loading space. It's a dual loaded space for the rear building and the front building, between the two buildings, kind of in the middle of the site. The issue there is just that, you're asking a customer to kind of take their couch if they're loading there 400 feet, all the way to the front of the building. If they had, a unit up towards here, which just isn't, from an operations standpoint, desirable. And we did look, I think one thing that's helpful here is because we're seeking the floating zone, that purpose or the intent, I think it's in the intent section of the underlying CR zones regarding the parking between the building and the street, doesn't apply to the floating zone. So we have some flexibility to kind of be able to address what is an existing site constraint. So we're trying to work within that, but I think from an operations standpoint, it's very important that we do have loading and parking up here, especially, obviously accessing the office. And as Rebecca alluded to, we just don't have, this is such a narrow site. It's only about 110 feet wide. We don't have an ability to locate it to the side. So I think it'd be helpful to continue to have follow-up meeting to kind of delve into this further, but.
Yeah, sure.
Liz, this is a tool here. I just want to add some thoughts to this. This use is particular in its sort of operational needs. We appreciate that. I think what we're going to have to work towards is really thinking about that entire space between the front of the building and the curb as one sort of design exercise. So right now, I think that it's very segmented. There are some thoughts around pedestrian improvements along the street. Then there are some thoughts about loading and servicing. And then there are some additional thoughts about, canopies and entrances. And all of those are kind of quite segmented. I think there's a solution here that can let you have, select loading up front. There's also a loading entry off the side that's not all the way in the back here that's shown on your screen, which can also be used. And then, really thinking about where to put those more pedestrian focused improvements. For example, the entry to the main office, which does not require parking and loading right at the head of it, could have an entry feature in terms of open space design that makes that sort of entry into it more focused around, someone who's not in their car. Similarly, that Natasha mentioned, we could narrow some of that pavement width along closer to the street for the turnarounds, because you don't need 35 plus feet to do that movement. And then really thinking about landscaping and other things like seating, et cetera, that we want to make sure that the project has some presence on the street in a meaningful way. So it's a bit of a Swiss watch, but I think we can work with you to get to a better place. The architecture is already an improvement, like you said, but I think the architecture also might give us some clues as to where to focus sort of the ground plane improvements on. And currently it's a very sort of segmented layout trying to fit the needs of different things in different portions of that space.
Yep, no, that's helpful as well. And I think you're right. And when you kind of talk about this, I mean, there's a lot of different constraints that we're trying to kind of marry them all together in terms of kind of how we address this. So we tried to kind of, advance it since our last meeting, but certainly we can have a follow-up meeting kind of with these existing condition plans and all that. I mean, I think the challenge with the side loading, and Pat could chime on this too, is this is really envisioned as kind of more short-term quick access, just because this is a narrower kind of drive aisle. We don't really want to encourage a lot of permanent parking here for the long-term loading access. And obviously it's just that one kind of door as opposed to the direct loading bays. So I think maybe during our meeting, we can have some of these existing condition plans for the full building, the rear building, and really kind of delve into both the operational site challenges and what we can do.
Yeah, and I think we don't have them, we didn't submit them, I don't think, but we can pull up, there was a lot of reference to the width of that drive aisle on the front. We did do, I believe, some auto turn studies, and, just even a small box truck does need a decent amount of room to get turned around in there to get into those loading spaces. But obviously we can relook at that again and see what we can do to maybe button it up, tighten it up.
Yep. Okay,
Yeah,
so this, oh, go ahead, sorry.
No, I was just saying, the site, as we all know, has a very sort of aspirational zoning on it, on the ground, like a CR 2.5, lots of height. This is a major corridor in the county. We understand you're not interested in redeveloping it, but as you add on to it, we want to make sure that some of that public realm sort of features that are anticipated in the sector plan do get sort of implemented incrementally over time. So that's kind of where our sort of the spirit of our comments is coming from.
Yeah, and I would add, this is Carrie Sanders, Chief Mid-County. I know, Liz, we've had some meetings on this, and I think Atul is completely right. I mean, we understand what you're doing and your goals, but that is a balance with what the master plan envisions. So we appreciate you looking at that and being creative about how we can accommodate the master plan recommendations on your site.
Sounds good. And I guess that'll lead us into our second one. I want to make sure we have time to chat about, and then we'll obviously need a follow-up meeting to delve into this further. Okay, so the second one was regarding kind of this connection to FDA from Lockwood Drive. We had taken a look at the master plan, and it really seems that this connection was contemplated, if and when this large quadrant collectively got redeveloped. Obviously, we control just 100 feet of the width. We do have 14 feet in the rear. I know we're currently showing as landscaping, but that wouldn't preclude a pedestrian connection there in the future in terms of actual physical space between the building and the rear of our property boundary. But the one thing that we noticed was also the bicycle master plan, which came kind of after the White Oak sector plan, seems to have kind of relocated that connection on the other side of the multifamily, which truthfully seems like the more logical spot, just because the multifamily does control the full depth between FDA and Lockwood Drive. So I guess that was one thing we wanted clarification on in terms of kind of, that seemed like the better spot, whether it's here or on this side of the multifamily, but the bicycle master plan seemed to relocate it further over. And it seemed like the second point, obviously, right, is that the master plan acknowledged that the county would need to engage in discussions with FDA regarding this access point. We just want to make sure that wherever the access point is located, you know, that when it's provided, that there's a place to go so that it's a safe connection point. And I guess
Liz,
this
on this drawing, the green dotted lines that you're showing, do you know what the actual bicycle master plan recommendation was for? Was it a shared use path or a separated bike lane, or?
it was a trail. It
was a trail.
And
Yeah,
this delved into Elwin's second comment. I'll just throw out there at the same time. In terms of this trail connection, I know, Elwin, you had mentioned that, you know, we should kind of be accommodating our site since FDA didn't want it, but this specifically was recommended for either the multifamily or FDA to implement. I think that's partly a recognition that we don't have space on the southern portion of our property to put in. It was a 10-foot wide trail.
Right, and Liz, that the trail's not, just so we're all clear, not running east-west, it's running north-south along the back of your site.
It's a screen line, so it goes from Lockwood to FDA. What do you have?
I'm sorry. What I'm saying is,
this one?
You can go back to the one we were just looking at. Right, so it would actually be parallel to the green line that you're referencing that goes up to Lockwood. So that connection would be right along the backside. Exactly, yes. So you would need to provide, you know, just because there was a new access point shown in the bike plan does not take away the recommendation in the White Oak plan. So we still need to accommodate that recommendation.
The bike plan is very selective in its recommendations for bicycle-focused facilities. And the sector plan's role is to really establish an idea around the grid of streets, the finer grain network of pedestrian connection. So we just want to clearly state it that those two are not interchangeable, just so that we are clear.
Okay. The other thing that when we were looking at this is this is the bikeway and trail actual map that's in the White Oak plan, which kind of didn't show a connection there. So there was really no, besides this kind of illustrative concept where it shows this pedestrian connection between FDA and Lockwood, and this is the language I copied here that came from that page. There's really no kind of details on this in terms of kind of what the master plan envisioned that in terms of width or anything like that. So do you have anything to point us to in terms of kind of at least what your staff's position is in terms of what that, because right now we do have 14 feet. I don't have a drawing that shows it unless someone wants to pull one out, 14 feet at the rear, which seems more than ample to be able to accommodate that in the future. It's certainly not something we would want to provide physically right now until there was a place to go, right? We don't want to encourage the public to kind of congregate back there where there's really no eyes on that portion of the site. But certainly our building placement isn't precluding that in the future.
Yeah, so, you know, we're working from the same language that you're referencing here. Okay. There's no discussion in the plan that this needs to be a vehicular connection. So I think we were all kind of collectively thinking that this was probably getting at a pedestrian connection. So I think, you know, we can certainly talk about the width, but it definitely needs to be shown on the plans and, you know, either as dedication or an easement. And I think that's a conversation we need to have with DOT.
Okay, and I know some of the things we've done before where we've had challenges, and actually there was one at another property at Nicholson Court, and I think we can continue the discussion on this as well, is where there's like this small stretch of a much larger connection that's being provided, is that there would be language perhaps if we did do some kind of easement for future, you know, dedication or future trail use that kind of set those triggers as to when it would become public access back there. So we can continue to work with you all on that.
Yeah, we'd be happy to coordinate on that.
And I guess closing loop on all the trail discussions. I think Elwin, you had the other comment about the trail I guess that would go between, eventually New Hampshire was going to go through the along Perimeter Road, then up to Lockwood along the multifamily. The challenges with anything kind of on the southern side of our property, if I have one, is there's really no room. I mean, it's just such a narrow site. And as you pointed out, this has all of the utility poles. But in looking at the bicycle master plan, it seems in the language you quoted, seems to really contemplate that trail would be on FDA and the multifamily site and not on ours.
Right, and that comment's more so geared towards the idea of, not necessarily building right now, but at least providing that space or at least avoiding the preclusion of that future construction with the placement of the new building.
Do you know how wide this even is? I mean, my concern is just, I just don't think we physically have the space. And because the bicycle master plan didn't recommend it on our site, that one seemed like perhaps it was an acknowledgement that we don't have the space on our site to provide that connection in the future.
Yeah, I want to say there's about 30 feet from the face of the building to the property line, and there's some grade on that green space too.
But we can include that in our follow-up discussion or meeting with you all, and I can reach out, Parker, to you to schedule kind of that follow-up meeting. Just kind of wanted to set the stage with some of our thoughts, and it sounds like, some of them are marrying kind of with your guys' thoughts as well on these comments. So I think that's really anything else from our team that we wanted to cover today. No. I think that was really it. We really do appreciate the comments we received and everyone's review of it. I know it's a unique application that we're doing the LMA and the conditional use together, and appreciate staff's ability to accommodate that with us, since we have to subsequently still go through sketch and site after this. So we do appreciate that. And again, I think we should just have a follow-up meeting where we can really roll up our sleeves and delve into some of these comments. Parker, is there a formal resubmission date that we're targeting? I don't know. Sometimes we have that with LMA and conditional uses, and sometimes we don't.
I can follow up with that information. Okay. I think it is less formally regimented as a sort of OZA application, but we can discuss that as well as a follow-up meeting.
Great. Okay, I'll reach out to you after this meeting and we can chat about that.
Great.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. We really appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye.